It's 7 p.m. Wednesday, June 19th here in Seoul.
Coming up on NEWSCENTER tonight. South Korea says it'll give 50,000 tons of rice to North Korea through the UN. That's on top of a previously announced $8 million worth of humanitarian assistance.
Seoul urges Tokyo to compensate forced laborers during Japan's colonial rule, proposing that both Korean and Japanese companies voluntarily contribute funds.
Ahead of his trip to North Korea, Chinese President Xi Jinping vows to play a bigger role in resolving issues on the Korean peninsula. The pledge comes in a rare op-ed for North Korea's official newspaper.
And President Moon Jae-in promises to boost the nation's manufacturing industry to help Korea become the world's fourth biggest exporter in the next decade. NEWSCENTER begins now.
Good evening and welcome to Arirang NEWSCENTER. Live from Seoul, I'm Han-daeun.
And I'm Noah Adam. Thank you as always for joining us this evening. We begin with a big announcement from South Korea's Unification Ministry. In addition to the $8 million aid to North Korea, South Korea is offering 50,000 tons of rice through a UN food agency.
For more on this, let's connect to our Oh Jung-hee, who's on the line for us. Chung-hee, so additional food aid to North Korea. Tell us more.
That is correct. Seoul's Unification Minister held a press briefing just an hour ago and announced that the government is providing food aid to North Korea. Take a listen to the announcement.
Considering the North's food situation and after consulting with the World Food Program, the government has decided to first provide 50,000 tons of rice and aid, hoping it can be delivered to the North Korean people as soon as possible.
The government says that there's been communication between Seoul and the WFP and between the WFP and Pyongyang, which led to an agreement on this food aid among the three parties. The South Korean government is now preparing to fine-tune details such as routes and dates regarding the aid delivery with the WFP. Once all preparations are over, Seoul will hand over the rice to the WFP at a South Korean port, putting the WFP at the helm of the delivery process until the aid reaches North Korea. The government hopes the food aid can arrive by September. Seoul is also considering providing additional food aid to the North later on after seeing how this one turns out.
Now, Chung-hee, we know that the North has been facing a food crisis recently, so the government's aid comes as no surprise as it is an act of solidarity and on humanitarian grounds. Nevertheless, can you briefly tell us how the aid came about and what Seoul expects from the aid delivery?
Well, we should go back to early May when the World Food Program and the Food and Agriculture Organization released a report on North Korea. It said that over 10 million people in the north, or about 40% of the population, are suffering from a food shortage, and added that almost 1.4 million tons of food aid are necessary to counter the crisis. Since then, the South Korean government has been considering sending food aid to the north in addition to $8 million in contribution to the WFP and UNICEF. Today, the government explained that the North faces its worst food crisis over the past 10 years, and Seoul can't ignore the crisis as the same people with North Koreans. So Seoul says that the food aid will help in not only reigniting the two Koreas' reconciliation process, but also contributing to creating a positive atmosphere for negotiations between Pyongyang and Washington. This is the 9th time South Korea is providing food aid to the North via WFP since 1996. Back to you all.
Our Oh Jung-hee at the Unification Ministry for us. Thank you. On the eve of his state visit to North Korea, Chinese leader Xi Jinping pledged to play a bigger role in promoting peace on the Korean peninsula by strengthening its cooperation with the North to resolve various issues. Our Kan Young-woo reports.
In a rare move, Chinese President Xi Jinping wrote an op-ed piece on Wednesday for Dodong Shinmun, North Korea's state-run newspaper, ahead of his two-day visit to North Korea. She stressed that Beijing will strengthen its communication and coordination with Pyongyang to make progress in resolving issues on the Korean peninsula. And by doing so, China will actively contribute to bringing peace and security in the region. She added that North Korea is headed in the right direction in trying to politically resolve the issues surrounding the Korean peninsula. Also saying that China is happy to see a historic opportunity, the Chinese leader emphasized that Beijing is willing to draft long-term plans with Pyongyang for lasting peace in the region without further elaboration. But Xi did not specifically use the word denuclearization in his writing. Meanwhile, South Korea's foreign ministry said the impending North Korea-China summit means Kim Jong-un is willing to stay in the talks, and the peace process on the Korean peninsula is happening through negotiations. The ministry added that the South Korean government is hopeful the Chinese leader's visit to the north will help achieve complete denuclearization and bring lasting peace on the Korean peninsula. But some experts are taking a more cautious approach to interpret Xi's visit to North Korea.
I will say the new momentum created by Xi Jinping and Kim will be limited. Will be great, but not enough to break the impasse, simply because the impasse was the scene between Kim and Trump.
Xi's two-day visit to the north will mark the first time a Chinese leader travels to the north in 14 years, whereas Kim Jong-un has visited China 4 times since last year. 간영우, Arirang News.
South Korea's defense minister has addressed the situation surrounding a North Korean fishing boat that crossed into South Korean waters undetected for more than 3 days until a civilian report brought the military's attention. This comes amid mounting concerns and criticism over possible loopholes in the military's maritime surveillance capabilities. Our Kim Ji-yeon reports.
During a biannual meeting of some 150 top commanders on Wednesday, South Korea's Defense Minister Chung Kyung-do said the situation involving a North Korean boat that crossed into South Korean waters last week undetected was a very grave situation and called for proactive measures to prevent a similar incident from happening again. Chung added those responsible will be reprimanded, reversing the military's previous stance on Monday that its overall coastal and maritime defense operations have proceeded normally at the time, and that existing surveillance systems detecting small wooden boats often have some limits depending on weather and other conditions.
Even if the military has done 100 good deeds, if there's a loophole in security operations, the military will lose the public's trust. Rather than blaming its equipment, the military should tighten its operational and work discipline.
According to a military official, the boat first crossed the de facto maritime demarcation line, the Northern Limit Line, at 9 p.m. last Wednesday, arriving near the eastern island of Ulleungdo at 6 a.m. on Thursday and stayed adrift there due to bad weather. The crew turned off its boat engine Friday night and waited in the water some 3 nautical miles away from South Korea's eastern port of Samcheok until the sun came up the next day. The boat reached Samcheok shore at 6:22 a.m. the following day on Saturday. One of the fishermen even asked South Korean passerby to lend him a cell phone to reach an aunt living in Seoul after stating they came from the north. A military official arrived at the scene at 7:35 a.m. Saturday, more than an hour since the boat first arrived ashore, in which it says officials saw the Coast Guard towing the boat away. Local media reported that the North Koreans waited until the early hours of dawn when South Korean fishermen started to head out to sea, afraid if they attempted to land in South Korean territory during nighttime, they would be detected. 2 out of 4 North Korean fishermen have stated they've wanted to defect to the south. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
In other news, after a 7-month review, the South Korean government now has a proposal in regards to a Supreme Court ruling on forced Korean laborers under Japanese colonial rule. Our Foreign Affairs correspondent Lee Ji-won is now on the line for us for more details. Ji-won, tell us more.
Well, the government on Wednesday announced that it proposed to Japan that the sued Japanese firms Nippon Steel and Sumitomo Metal Corporation and Mitsubishi Heavy Industries should voluntarily contribute to a fund to compensate the victims with the help of several unspecified Korean firms. Korean victims of forced labor have won 3 court cases since last year, and the total compensation amount stands at $1.15 million. A foreign affairs official told reporters that they considered 3 factors: respect for judicial authority, the victims, and the international regulation.
And should Japan accept this proposal, the government said it'll consider accepting Tokyo's request for diplomatic talks, which is outlined as the first step the two countries should take in the event of a disagreement as part of their 1965 agreement that normalized their ties.
Right, Siwon, any reaction from Japan or the firms at all? And how will the Korean and Japanese firms divide the payment?
Well, soon after the announcement was made, Japan's Kyodo News Agency reported that Takeshi Osuga, the foreign press secretary, held a press conference. He said that the proposal does not solve South Korea's violation of international law and thus cannot be a solution. Japan has been arguing that it's already compensated the victims when the two sides normalized their ties back in 1965. To this, a South Korean official said that Seoul will wait until Japan makes an official response. Now, meanwhile, the official also said the government hasn't yet talked to the Korean firms in question or consulted with each individual victims regarding the proposal. The official said the proposal was based on a collection of opinions from various experts, government officials, as well as what's been reported on the victims. Thus, if even one plaintiff insists on receiving all its compensation only from the Japanese firms, and the firms continue to refuse this, the current legal process of freezing the firm's assets within the country will continue and force a potential sell-off. And as of now, there is no set ratio on who gives how much, and the official said that it's up to the plaintiffs and the Japanese firms to decide on the specifics. Back to you guys.
That was our Foreign Ministry correspondent Lee Ji-won on the line for us. Thank you. In economy-related news, President Moon Jae-in unveiled his plans to transform Korea's manufacturing sector as part of its strategy to revitalize the country's economy. He said the fate of Korea's economy hangs in its balance and that the country must cultivate its future growth engines. Our Shin Se-min reports.
President Moon Jae-in shared his aspirations of reviving the country's manufacturing sector, deemed the traditional pillars of Korea's economy.
제조업 부흥이 곧 경제 부흥입니다. 제조업 사강과 함께 국민 소득 3만 불 시대를 열겠습니다.
The president announced a strategy dubbed Manufacturing Renaissance Vision at an event held at the Smart Manufacturing Innovation Center in Ansan, south of Seoul. His plan includes Korea becoming the world's fourth largest manufacturing power by the year 2030 and pulling the economy out of its low growth track. It also aims to boost the country's exports to the world's top four, currently in sixth place, and expand the number of global exporting firms to 1,200, more than double from the current 570. The president expressed concerns, however, over the lack of new industries to lead future growth. Compounded by structural issues like the fall in the working age population and the slowing global economy, he said the industry will only face future economic headwinds.
도약이냐 정체냐. 지금 우리 제조업은 중대 갈림길에 있습니다. 혁신 선도형 산업 구조로 전환이 시급한 시점입니다.
By breaking away from the long-established strategy of the past, the president added that the country will undergo an industrial paradigm shift, highlighted by the keywords smart, eco-friendly, and fusion. The government said it plans to invest some $7.1 billion in non-memory chip, biohealth, and future cars, the administration's new growth engines, on top of $152 billion worth of private sector investments. He also revealed that a joint private and public coordination body will be established, chaired by the president himself, to discuss various issues like production costs, labor, and management conflicts. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, the Trade Ministry has announced details of its own on measures to revitalize the country's manufacturing sector aimed at transforming South Korea into the world's fourth largest exporter. Kim Hye-sung reports.
Restructuring existing industries, finding new growth engines, nurturing talent, and attracting more investment. That's the government's plan to boost its manufacturing sector, which accounts for nearly a third of the country's GDP, but is hobbled by its stagnant automobile and shipbuilding industries and a lack of new businesses to drive future growth. The government's goal is to raise the proportion of value-added industries in manufacturing from the current 25% to the OECD average of around 30%. To nurture new industries and develop new products, the government will push for structural changes by introducing more smart factories as well as AI and robots. In particular, the government will invest over $7 billion in 3 new industries, including future cars, non-memory chips, and biotech. This will be backed up by private sector investment of more than $153 billion by the year 2030.
To push for qualitative growth in manufacturing amid fiercer global competition, government support and investment is important. But with convergence between manufacturing, services, and IT becoming the new trend in the fourth industrial revolution, easing regulations in Korea is actually more important to boost innovation.
In fact, the Korea Chamber of Commerce and Industry's poll on 500 local manufacturing firms Tuesday shows that 2 out of 3 surveyed haven't found new businesses to drive sustainable future growth. They're also losing competitiveness caught in between firms from advanced countries and emerging economies. The Trade Ministry said it'll develop a detailed plan to boost the country's manufacturing sector by nurturing talent in engineering and manufacturing and providing tax incentives as well as financial support for startups and mid-sized firms. Kim Hae-sung, Arirang News.
Now, hydrogen technology has been touted by South Korea as one of the country's future growth engines, with the government revealing its hydrogen roadmap back in January. A Hydrogen Expo was held here in Seoul for the first time, and our Kim Da-mi went to see if hydrogen really is the country's future.
South Korea is making a huge bet that the first element of the periodic table, hydrogen, will fuel Asia's 4th largest economy. Korea's shift toward hydrogen as an energy source for the future is based on the country's need to reduce its heavy reliance on oil imports and its carbon footprint. This car is one of the 3 fuel cell electric vehicles sold in the world. It sucks in air, which provides the oxygen to combine with hydrogen to produce energy. During the process, microparticles including fine dust are filtered out, and the rest of the air leaves the car cleaner than it was before. It sounds too good to be true for some people who have raised concerns over possible safety issues that have been linked to hydrogen-powered vehicles.
People in general believe that there are risks of hydrogen tank explosion. In order for explosions to actually happen, oxygen needs to flow into the tank. But as soon as oxygen flow takes place, the vehicle automatically emits hydrogen. Plus, there's no explosion because the tank is made out of carbon fibers, not steel.
The government now aims to have 6.2 million hydrogen-powered vehicles on the country's roads, with 1,200 refilling stations by 2040 from the current 1,700 vehicles and 17 stations available across the country. Both China and the US have set their 2030 targets for hydrogen vehicles at 1 million. With the help of hydrogen-fueled vehicles, South Korea hopes to attract fresh investment, revive its sluggish manufacturing sector, and create 420,000 new jobs. In order to develop hydrogen technology as a future energy source, experts from the International Electrotechnical Commission highlighted the importance of safety and strict verification when establishing international hydrogen standardizations. Kim Da-mi, Arirang News.
Global credit rating agency Fitch Ratings and investment firm Goldman Sachs have both cut their growth forecast for South Korea. Fitch slashed Korea's 2019 GDP growth estimate yesterday to 2%, down from 2.5%, citing an economic slump in the first quarter, sluggish exports and falling semiconductor prices. Goldman Sachs cut its forecast by 0.2 percentage points to 2.1%, citing prolonged US-China trade tensions. Goldman Sachs had previously forecast that the Bank of Korea would maintain its benchmark interest rate, but now says there will likely be 2 rate cuts by next year. The lowered forecasts follow similar actions from the World Bank, the OECD and the Bank of Korea. There's just over a week left until the G20 Summit in Japan kicks off, but all eyes will be on US President Donald Trump's meeting with his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping on the sidelines of that gathering in Osaka. Aside from trade, North Korea's denuclearization is also expected to be on the agenda. Ko Ryun-hee with more.
U.S. President Donald Trump has signaled a possible easing of trade tensions between Washington and Beijing. Trump tweeted Tuesday that he spoke over the phone with his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping and said they'll have an extended meeting at next week's G20 Summit in Osaka. President Trump said their respective teams will begin lower-level talks prior to his face-to-face with President Xi in Japan, and he emphasized the need for talks at this time.
China very much wants to discuss the future, and so do we. So the relationship with President Xi is a very good one.
Speaking to reporters on the same day, White House economic advisor Larry Kudlow declined to provide details of the preparations President Trump mentioned, but emphasized that Beijing must make structural changes for a trade deal.
We want structural changes on all the items, the theft of IP, the forced transfers of technology, cyber hacking, of course, trade barriers. We've got to have something that's enforceable.
China's state broadcaster CCTV also announced that President Xi is ready to meet Trump in Osaka to exchange views on China-U.S. relations. President Xi said he expects positive outcomes at the G20 summit. And in terms of trade, he stressed the two sides should solve their problems through dialogue on equal footing. This comes after the world's biggest economies have put tariffs on around $360 billion worth of each other's goods since last year. Their trade negotiations ended in May without a deal, and since then, Washington and Beijing have been blaming each other for the collapse of the talks. Analysts say President Trump and Xi are also expected to discuss issues related to the Korean Peninsula, such as North Korea's denuclearization, because the G20 meeting will fall a week after President Xi travels to Pyongyang. An analyst told the South China Morning Post that China may be using North Korea as leverage amid its trade conflict with the U.S. Ko Ryun-hee, Arirang News.
And staying with President Trump, he is formally launching his bid for re-election in 2020 with a huge rally in Orlando, Florida. He's no longer the dark horse candidate that few people thought would win back in 2016, but there's little doubt the love him or hate him president has a few challenges to overcome. That said, Trump being Trump, he's sure to have some aces up his sleeve in the months to come. Oh Soo-young reports.
And as long as you keep this team in place, we have a tremendous way to go. Our future has never, ever looked brighter or sharper.
He promised a break from traditional politics. And in his second run for America's top office, US President Donald Trump on Tuesday once again pitched himself as the face of change at a rally in Orlando, Florida.
So he still is the guy who is shaking up everything, and you can see that in almost every day when he does tweets, launches new policies and tariffs and tensions with Mexico and Iran and so on. He is still, to some extent, a disruptor.
Trump's strongest case for re-election is the robust US economy, with more Americans than ever before upbeat about employment and wages.
Trump made this appeal to working class people, and his actions with respect to Mexico and China, with respect to tariffs, I think it does appeal to a lot of people in those battleground states like Michigan, Ohio, and Wisconsin, as well as Pennsylvania. Another area that really appeals to the base as well is immigration, of course. And so he's taken a very strong stance on that issue, pressured Mexico.
But whether he's made America great again is debatable. Despite strong support from his party and small dollar donors, polls indicate the greater public are not convinced. Trump has the lowest approval rating in US presidential history, averaging 40%.
Markets are beginning to realize that you can't exactly bank on what the president says. And I think a lot of Americans are sort of sick and tired of the ongoing chaos that is the Trump presidency.
Domestic concerns such as climate change, the expansion of healthcare and abortion rights are likely to be chinks in the armour for the incumbent president, who has largely disregarded these issues. His party's internal polling shows he lags behind former Vice President Joe Biden in key battleground states. However, some say a foreign policy victory of his own could swing voters in his favour.
He could pull off his own October surprise and have a Halloween agreement with Kim Jong-un. I think Kim knows that his best shot is for Trump to have a second term. And he would rather get the substance of a deal that can be built upon rather than roll the dice and just cross his fingers what might happen in 2020.
The insurgent candidate in 2016 and now running as the incumbent. He may now be the establishment, but it's clear President Trump has more shaking up to do in the months to come. Seoul, Arirang News.
10 years have passed since South Korea first distributed its 50,000 won bills, but they now account for almost 85% of the value of all banknotes in circulation in the country. The Bank of Korea said last month that the bills made roughly 37% of all bills, and that they had a combined value of over $83 billion. South Korea began printing the largest denomination bill worth some $42.50 each in June 2009. Nearly 4 billion of them have been printed over the past 10 years. Amid concerns over the safe disposal of radioactive wastewater after the 2011 Fukushima nuclear disaster, Korean researchers have invented a special robot that's capable of removing cesium from the water. The Korea Atomic Energy Research Institute said on Wednesday that they invented a small underwater robot, just 7 micrometers long, that can detect and adsorb cesium from wastewater. Cesium is a radioactive substance that's difficult to dispose and is hazardous to human health. The institute plans to conduct additional research in the hopes of commercializing the technology by 2023. A consortium led by Korea Electric Power Corporation has been named the preferred bidder for a power plant project in Guam. KEPCO said in a statement that it's been favored by the Guam Power Authority to build and operate gas-fired power plant with an output of 200 megawatts, as well as a 25-megawatt capacity energy storage facility. The project will start in May next year, and construction is scheduled to be completed in October 2022, after which KEPCO will operate the plant for 25 years. The company previously signed a contract with Guam in 2017 to build a solar power plant there, and with the new project, KEPCO will be responsible for 55% of the island territory's energy production. As the summer vacation is nearing, many people are not only planning to head out to the beaches or mountains, but also to some places in the city where they can enjoy indoor activities while also taking respite from the heat. Our Yoon Jung-min has the story.
Many people visit special movie theaters to shelter from the heat and enjoy their vacation indoors. To accommodate their needs, theaters provide premium services with large beds or couches and cozy lights. These special theaters can cost up to 45,000 Korean won or some $38 per person, but an increasing number of people look for these luxury services to enjoy their summer indoors.
Outside, it's very hot, but inside here, it's pleasant. I can also enjoy hobbies indoors or take a rest, so I often come here. I also plan to visit more often in the summer to stay away from the heat.
It's getting hot these days, and it's stressful. I came here to enjoy a movie while staying cool.
And it's not just movie theaters that are getting busy ahead of the vacation season. Other places are also expecting more customers who wish to spend their vacation indoors. Virtual reality or VR theme parks give people a chance to experience rafting, fishing, or surfing through VR games so they can enjoy those activities while staying cool indoors. The park also has a VR horror zone for chills of a different kind.
Of course, you will feel it's more real out there, but inside here, it's convenient and easy to access these activities.
An increasing number of people also visit Gwangmyeong Cave in Gyeonggi-do Province, which is only about an hour from Seoul Station by car. As the vacation season nears, many people are looking for places to shelter from the heat, making such attractions increasingly popular. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
From next month, South Korea will impose a 10% VAT on international IT giants such as Google, Facebook and YouTube. This follows a revision to the VAT Act, which mandates taxes on foreign companies' business-to-consumer digital services, including online advertisements and cloud computing. The move is expected to increase the price competitiveness of domestic IT firms and to establish an estimate of how much foreign IT firms are making in South Korea through B2C transactions. South Korea's steelmaker POSCO has been selected as the world's most competitive steelmaker for the 10th year in a row. Market research firm World Steel Dynamics picked the firm as the world's top steelmaker at an industry conference in New York earlier this week. POSCO ranked first in 7 categories, including industrial costs, technological innovation and high value-added products. The government's vacation support program for workers at small and medium-sized companies seemed to have helped boost local tourism last year. The Korea Tourism Organization today released the results of a survey on some 1,000 participants of the program. 54% of them took time off for a vacation in Korea and another 40% changed their overseas vacation plans to a domestic one. Employees at SMEs can use the program to receive some $85 worth of points to spend on local travel programs. K-pop group BTS's world tour has so far managed to rake in almost $80 million in ticket sales. According to the Billboard box score, more than half of that has come from the band's first US stadium tour, with the rest coming from tours in Europe and South America. Industry insiders expect sales figures to reach over $85 million after the group's tour of Japan next month. That has been your 3-minute news flash.
It was a cloudy and breezy afternoon, and by nighttime, there's a chance of local showers in the southern provinces.
So there has been a lot of rain recently. Let's get more on the weather from our Michelle Park at the Weather Center. Michelle.
Good evening, guys. There may be a bit of drizzles in the central region tonight, while a bit of more rain will fall around Gyeongsangdo and Jeollabuk provinces. And after a couple of more days of rain, the nation will have some brighter skies tomorrow, so the mercury will climb higher than today. Now, in the mornings, it will be somewhat cloudy, waking up to 19 degrees Celsius, and Busan and Jeju will be under sunny spells with temperatures a few degrees warmer. And Seoul's daytime highs will be on the hot side at 28 degrees, while Chuncheon and Daegu will top into the 30s. Now, hope you make time to enjoy the pleasant weather tomorrow because more rain is in the forecast. Now, although we are receiving frequent rain, we haven't entered the monsoon season yet, but as of now, it seems to be roughly a week later than the average years. So the monsoon season is predicted to begin as of the first week of July. I'll leave you with the weather conditions around the world.
That wraps up this edition of Arirang News. Thank you as always for watching.
News in Depth is next.